I didn't choose to be the black sheep. That title was assigned to me before I even knew what it meant. It wasn't something I earned or even something I could shake off. It stuck like wet paint on bare skin, no matter how much I tried to wash it off. You see, I was the firstborn in a family where appearances mattered more than honesty, where silence was valued over truth, and where loyalty meant obedience, not love. Growing up in our small two-story home in the suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, life appeared picture perfect from the outside. White siding, a red front door, flower beds that my mom meticulously maintained. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My dad worked as a shift supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and my mom stayed home, keeping everything running smoothly. Or so it seemed. From as early as I can remember, there were two sets of rules in our house: the ones written in stone for me, and the invisible ones that floated on air for my younger brother, Danny. He was born 3 years after me, and from the moment he came home swaddled in hospital-issued flannel, he became the sun around which the entire family orbited. When Danny broke a neighbor's window playing baseball, it was just boys being boys. When I forgot to unload the dishwasher after dinner, it was a lecture about responsibility and respect. When Danny brought home a report card with 2 Ds, my parents blamed the teacher. When I brought home all A's and 1 B, they asked what happened. There was no room for error with me, no grace, no margin, just expectation. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had been counting down for weeks. I invited a few friends from school, and my mom made my favorite chocolate cake with raspberry filling. I thought that day would finally be about me. But 2 hours into the party, Danny decided to do a cannonball into the cake table while pretending to be a superhero. Cake everywhere. Balloons popped. One of my friends went home crying because she got frosting in her eye. My parents laughed. They told me not to be so sensitive. "It's just a cake," my dad said, ruffling Danny's hair. No one offered to remake it. No one said sorry. It was a small moment, but one that stayed with me longer than most of the bigger ones. Because it was the first time I realized, in this family, I was always going to come second to Danny. By the time I was 13, I had learned how to become invisible. Not physically, of course, but emotionally. I stopped bringing home art projects or asking them to come to school plays. What was the point? They never noticed. They never came. I poured myself into books, into writing, into studying. My room became my sanctuary, the one place Danny didn't barge into, the one place I could control. School was my escape. I joined the library club, the debate team, and later, student council. Not because I wanted to pad a college resume, I didn't even know what a resume was then, but because I needed something that was mine. I needed a place where effort was rewarded, not resented. I got my first job at 15, working part-time at a local diner called Mel's. It was greasy, loud, and busy as hell, but I loved it. Mel, the owner, took a liking to me and taught me how to balance trays like a pro. He gave me extra shifts when I asked for them and even let me keep my tips when most new hires had to pool theirs. At home, no one cared. My parents didn't ask how work was. Danny would just laugh and call me a wannabe waitress. "You're gonna smell like bacon for the rest of your life," he'd sneer. When I saved up $300 to buy my own secondhand laptop, my mom asked why I was wasting money when we already have a family computer. The family computer, mind you, which Danny hogged every night to play video games. But the worst part, the absolute soul-crushing part, wasn't the favoritism. It wasn't even the verbal jabs or the double standards. It was the gaslighting. If I ever brought up how unfair things felt, my mom would smile sweetly and say, "You're just more mature, sweetheart. We expect more from you because you can handle it." My dad would chime in with, "You know we love you both the same. Don't make this into something it's not." But it was something. It was a pattern, a cycle, a silent contract that I never agreed to but was bound by anyway. I wasn't the child they praised or protected. I was the one they depended on, leaned on, and left behind when it was convenient. Still, I kept going. I kept pushing. Because some part of me believed that if I just worked hard enough, just accomplished enough, one day they'd see me. One day I'd be more than the backup plan. One day I wouldn't be the black sheep. But that day never came. Not when I got my scholarship to college. Not when I landed my first job in a new city with no help from anyone. Not when I sent them birthday gifts or called every Sunday, even when they forgot mine. In their eyes, I was still the outsider, the girl who left. the one who thought she was better than the rest of them. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't think I was better. I just wanted to be equal. That's where it all began. That's the foundation of everything that followed. That's how a 17-year-old girl with a waitress apron, a worn-out laptop, and a lifetime of being dismissed began to build a life where, finally, no one could take anything from her. And that's when they came back into my life. Not with love, but with greed. That's when they used my name. That's when the story really began. I wish I could tell you that the betrayal came out of nowhere, that I never saw it coming. But that would be a lie. The truth is, when you grow up in a family that teaches you to doubt your own instincts, you stop trusting the gut feelings that whisper, something isn't right. The first time it happened, it was almost laughably small. I was 22, fresh out of college, barely keeping my head above water. I had just started my first job in a small marketing agency in Indianapolis. The pay wasn't great, but I was proud. It felt good to be independent, even if I was living in a cramped studio apartment where the oven didn't work and the neighbor played death metal at 2 a.m. I was sitting on the floor one afternoon, surrounded by takeout containers and unpaid bills, when I got a letter from a bank I didn't recognize. Capital Vest Financial. They were thanking me for my recent application and asking for confirmation on some details before approving a $15,000 personal loan. I thought it was spam, tossed it in the trash, forgot about it. 2 weeks later, another letter. This time, it was a friendly reminder that my loan payment was due. Payment. On a loan I never took. I called the number on the letter, still thinking this was some kind of scam, a mistake. But after 20 minutes of holding and a conversation with someone named Monica in accounts receivable, my stomach dropped through the floor. They had my full name, my birth date, my social security number. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had taken a loan in my name. I hung up, hands shaking. My thoughts raced through a list of possibilities. A stranger? Identity theft? Some hacker halfway across the world? That night I sat down and pulled my credit report. What I saw made me nauseous. There were not one, but 3 accounts I didn't recognize. A personal loan, an auto loan, and a credit card with a $4,000 balance already racked up. I barely slept. The next morning, I called my mom. "Hey, quick question," I said, trying to sound casual. "Have you or Dad used my social security number for anything? I think my identity might have been stolen." There was a pause. Too long. Then she said, "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic." "I'm not. I pulled my credit report. There are loans in my name. I didn't take them." Well, maybe it was something from college. You know, sometimes those student accounts can be confusing. Except it wasn't. I had tracked every dime of my federal loans. These were new, recent accounts. The next day, I called Danny. "Bro, did you take out a loan in my name?" I asked. No preamble. Silence. Then, it's not like you were using your credit for anything." The casualness in his voice made my skin crawl. He admitted it like it was no big deal. He needed help. He figured it would get approved faster with my name. Our parents co-signed. "It was just for a car," he said. "Just a car." I couldn't even find the words. "You committed fraud," I whispered. "Don't be so uptight. It's family. Family helps each other." That was the beginning of the spiral. I found out later that it wasn't just Danny. My parents had known. They had helped. They signed the forms. They gave him my social security number. They thought it was temporary. They figured I wouldn't mind. They assumed I wouldn't notice. They figured wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I filed fraud reports, froze my credit, spent hours on hold with banks and credit agencies. I cried in the bathroom at work. I had panic attacks at 3 a.m. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I read every article I could find on credit law, consumer rights, identity protection. When I confronted my parents again, they played the same old song. "We raised you, you ungrateful girl. You have a good job now. What's the problem?" Danny needed help. He was struggling. No apology, no remorse, just entitlement. And that was the moment something in me snapped. I realized that to them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource, a backup plan, a wallet. I cut them off, blocked their numbers, changed my address, told my HR department to send my pay stubs electronically, and took my name off every shared account I could find. I told my landlord not to release any info to anyone, even if they claimed to be family. I left my apartment 2 months later and moved without telling anyone. I didn't leave a forwarding address, and for the first time in my life, I breathed. It wasn't over, of course. Credit takes time to recover. Legal processes drag on. Danny tried contacting me through burner numbers. My parents emailed me from fake accounts, but I didn't respond. They had stolen something precious from me. Not just my financial future, not just my name. They had stolen my trust, but they had also done something else, unintentionally. They had lit a fire I would use to build something they could never touch. Because if I was the black sheep, so be it. Better to be black sheep than a sacrificial lamb, and from that moment on, I vowed I would never let anyone, not even blood, use me again. I thought the worst part was over, that once I confronted them, froze my credit, and moved out of reach, I'd feel safe, maybe even free. But what they don't tell you is that after the explosion, the silence is almost louder. The first week after I cut contact, I woke up every day feeling like I'd forgotten something. I'd look at my phone expecting a missed call from my mom or some passive-aggressive text from Danny. Nothing. Just the digital silence of a family that only loved you when you were useful. But it didn't stay silent for long. It started with the voicemails. "Sarah, this is your father. You're acting crazy. Call us back." Then came the guilt bombs. "How could you do this to your family?" "Danny's hurting." "Your mom is sick with worry." My favorite was from my mom. "I didn't raise you to be this selfish." I listened to every single one. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me was still looking for that one message that said, "I'm sorry, we were wrong." But it never came. Only blame, excuses, and accusations. A week later, I got a message from Danny. "Sis, come on, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I said I was sorry. You want me to go to jail over a stupid car?" He wasn't sorry. He never had been. He was sorry he got caught. Sorry that I didn't roll over and let them wipe their feet on me. I remember standing in my new apartment. Bare walls, a single mattress on the floor, everything smelling faintly of paint, and realizing this was the first time in my life I had total control. No one knew where I lived. No one could take anything from me. And I cried. Not because I was sad, because I was finally grieving. Grieving the idea of the family I thought I had. Grieving the years I spent trying to earn their love like it was some prize I hadn't worked hard enough for. Grieving for the little girl who made straight A's and still felt invisible. It was in that tiny apartment with its secondhand table and a desk made of stacked crates that I began writing again. Journaling every day. I wrote down every conversation, every moment I remembered feeling small. I cataloged every insult disguised as advice, every guilt trip disguised as love. And as I wrote, the fog started to lift. I started seeing patterns, like how my parents only called me when they needed something, how Danny's mistakes were always someone else's fault, how I had been taught to minimize my wins so they wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. I started seeing me clearly, not as the black sheep, but as someone who had survived in a field full of wolves wearing family masks. A month passed, then two. The emails slowed, the voicemails stopped, the silence returned, but this time it was peaceful. I started focusing on my work more. I took on extra projects, started learning about investing, and poured myself into growing a savings account. Something just for me. Then came the letter. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We're your family, you're being cruel. Danny's in trouble again and needs your help. Please don't abandon us like this." No signature, no apology, just another demand wrapped in shame. That was the moment I knew for certain. I had never been part of a family. I had been part of a system that revolved around Danny's comfort, my parents' control, and the expectation that I would always come last. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a decision. I would rebuild, brick by brick, a life they could never reach, a fortress made of independence, success, and boundaries they couldn't breach. The explosion had already happened. Now it was time to clear the rubble and start building. You never really know how strong you are until you have no one to lean on. And that's exactly what those first few years felt like. Standing on a wire above a canyon with no net and no one cheering you on. But sometimes, when you've been silenced long enough, that quiet becomes fuel. After cutting my family off, I made a list, not a bucket list, a survival list. It had 3 columns: financial, career, and personal. Under financial, pay off identity theft damage, start emergency fund, learn about investing. Under career, take a course every 3 months, ask for a raise, grow network. Under personal, go to therapy, join a book club, say yes to new people. That list became my compass. The first thing I did was find a credit repair advisor who didn't talk down to me. Her name was Brenda, and she was the first person in a long time who didn't treat my story like a cautionary tale or a tragedy. She treated it like a beginning. She gave me structure, dispute letters, follow-up calls, timelines. Together, we spent 18 months untangling the damage my family had done. It was exhausting, and it was empowering. Every time a fraudulent account was removed, I felt lighter. I started treating my money like armor. I read every personal finance book I could find. I followed YouTubers, joined budgeting forums, and tracked every single dollar. It wasn't about being rich. It was about reclaiming something they had stolen, my security. At work, I became a different person. I stopped waiting to be recognized. I started speaking up in meetings. I volunteered for high-profile projects. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I had something to prove to myself. Within a year, I was promoted, then again. My coworkers started asking me for advice. My boss gave me the company card to attend a branding conference in Chicago, and I went alone, took notes like my life depended on it, and came back with 5 ideas that ended up doubling our outreach engagement. That was when I got noticed by another company, a boutique luxury goods consultancy looking for someone with both branding experience and analytical rigor. They offered me a 40% salary increase. I took it. Suddenly, I was in a new office with floor-to-ceiling windows and coffee machines that ground beans on demand. The clients were high-end: antique dealers, estate managers, luxury collectors. They spoke in terms like pedigree, provenance, and valuation, and I ate it up. I started spending time in the archives: old records, vintage product catalogs, authentication papers. It was here that something clicked. I remembered organizing Grandma Marie's costume jewelry as a kid, how I used to sort them by color, then by era, how I had created little tags and assigned fake values, how I could tell a piece was from the 1950s just by the clasp. Back then, I was just passing time in a corner where Rachel wouldn't follow me. Now I realized I had a gift. I had a memory for detail, a knack for spotting fakes, a hunger to understand origin stories. I started asking to shadow the firm's jewelry consultant whenever possible. He was nearing retirement, and to my surprise, he didn't mind. I carried his cases, took notes, asked questions. I think he saw something in me, not polish, but purpose. When he announced his retirement, the firm didn't hire a replacement. Instead, they gave me the opportunity to start taking on small evaluation cases. I didn't sleep much those months. I took online gemology courses at night. I practiced at pawn shops on weekends. I networked with estate agents. I built a portfolio, and then came the Kingston estate, an old widow, no children, boxes and boxes of what everyone thought were costume jewelry. But I spotted a brooch that looked off, too heavy, too well made. The pinback was complex. It wasn't fake. I stayed late for 2 weeks, comparing it to Cartier signatures, writing a full report, building a presentation. The firm sold it at auction for $47,000. I got my first real commission. More importantly, I got respect. The clients started asking for me. The firm added authenticator to my title. My inbox started filling with side inquiries from private collectors. I worked double time to keep up. I reinvested every extra cent into courses, tools, and a personal workspace. By year 3, I had a reputation. Not loud, not viral, but whispered in rooms where trust mattered. I was the one who could find the truth in the tiniest details. Who didn't miss a mark, didn't guess, didn't bluff. That's when I began to wonder, could I build something of my own? Not just a career, but a legacy. Not for them, for me. For that quiet girl who was told to lower her voice, who gave up birthdays, who was called selfish for saying no. I didn't have investors, or mentors, or family cheering me on. What I had was fire, and finally, the freedom to let it burn. The email that changed everything wasn't even directed to me. It was a general alert from a property auction listing I had subscribed to out of habit more than hope. After years of researching estates and appraising jewelry, I developed a fascination with forgotten places, homes left behind, foreclosed on, or passed down and sold off. So when I clicked open that Monday morning email and saw the address, I froze. 1227 Fairview Lane. My childhood home. The house with the red door. The flower beds my mother used to obsess over. The cracked driveway where Danny crashed his bike and blamed me for distracting him. The place I had been exiled from emotionally and, eventually, physically. The listing said the property was in pre-foreclosure. An auction date had been scheduled. A blurry picture of the exterior showed the paint peeling, the lawn patchy, the mailbox crooked. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes. It felt surreal. I had long accepted that I would never go back, never stand in that living room again or smell the pine-scented cleaner my mother used on Sundays. I had buried that house in my memory, under years of erasure and quiet grief. And now it was mine for the taking. The temptation was immediate and terrifying. I could almost hear their voices. "You're doing this to spite us. How dare you swoop in while we're down? This proves you've always thought you were better than us." But beneath that guilt, something else stirred. A hunger. Not for revenge, but for reclamation. For closure. I didn't tell anyone. Not my assistant, not my firm partners, not even Brenda, who had become something of a surrogate aunt to me. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want advice. I wanted agency. I called the county clerk's office to confirm the debt. It was massive. Apparently, my parents had taken out a second mortgage to help Danny start yet another failed business. Landscaping this time. He had bought equipment, a truck, and then nothing. No business license, no clients, no work. The auction was scheduled for 30 days out. I marked it in red ink on the corner of my calendar, then highlighted it digitally. For the next 4 weeks, I went about my life like normal, but everything felt different. Every meeting, every call, every late-night authentication was building toward that one moment. The day arrived. The auction was held in a beige municipal building with flickering fluorescent lights. It smelled like floor wax and tired ambition. I wore my most neutral outfit. Black turtleneck, slacks, a plain watch, no makeup, no jewelry. There were 5 people in the room. Only one other bidder. It was over in 4 minutes. I bought the house for less than a year's worth of my firm's net profit. Just like that. I was the legal owner of the place where my voice had been silenced, my wins ignored, and my trust shattered. I didn't visit right away. For 2 weeks, I let the paperwork settle. I had the locks changed through a contractor. I requested a clean-out crew. The report they sent back was sobering. Rotted floorboards, mold in the bathrooms, unpaid utility notices piled up on the counter. Danny had been living there alone. My parents had already moved into a rented apartment across town. He left behind a mattress, 2 garbage bags of clothes, a broken lawn chair, and a shoebox of old mail. I found a card addressed to me in the pile. Never sent. "Sarah, I know I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please don't shut me out forever. I'm still your brother." It wasn't signed. I sat in the hallway and read it twice. Then I dropped it in the trash bag and tied it shut. The past didn't own me anymore. I hired a renovation team. Gave them one instruction: keep the bones, change everything else. I chose warm neutrals, clean lines, modern fixtures. No trace of our childhood remained when they finished. The red door was repainted soft charcoal gray. The flower beds were replaced with drought-resistant succulents. The crooked mailbox? Gone, and when it was finished, I didn't sell it. I turned it into a women's shelter. 2 bedrooms, shared kitchen, lockable storage. A safe place for women escaping situations like mine. Families that never saw them, husbands who controlled them, partners who drained them. I named it the Fairview House. Not for the street it was on, but because now, finally, I could look at my past with clarity, with fairness, with peace. I never told my parents, never told Danny. They still don't know who owns it. They think some LLC swooped in and gutted the place. And maybe that's true. But it was the girl they forgot, the one they stole from, who walked back into that house with keys in hand. And finally took it all back.